Thank you all for being here this evening. It is my honor to welcome you all here on this balmy Illinois evening to the third from the agricultural community who explores issues. Monmouth College. First, of course, the college sits in the midst of one of the world's great breadbaskets. Also, the Wiswell-Robeson Lecture complements several other food and agriculture-related initiatives at the college. For example, for nearly a decade, college faculty and students have maintained a garden and farm near the campus. Monmouth's innovative global food security triad allows students to explore issues in agriculture and food security from a multidisciplinary perspective in anthropology, biology, and economics. Other members of our faculty are engaged in additional curricular innovations in agriculture, including including, for example, the application of data science to agriculture. The college is also establishing a strong relationship with the future farmers of America. And finally, Monmouth was the only liberal arts college among the charter signatories of Presidents United to Solve Hunger, a United Nations-sponsored initiative to bring the energy of colleges and universities from around the world to address hunger. The Wiswell-Robeson Lecture, one of the college's most distinguished lectures, was established in 2016 through a generous gift from Jean Giddings Robeson, a 1960 graduate of the college. Robeson and her late husband Don, who was a 1954 Monmouth graduate, operated their farm in Warren County from 1960 to 1996. Jean carried on a family legacy of women in farming stretching back to the 1880s. Please join me in thanking Jean and her current husband, Louis Gould, for their generosity and support. I also want to thank Dean Kim Kidwell for being with us this evening, taking time in the midst of a busy schedule, and especially for the energy and ambition that she brings to our work. She is an asset and an addition to all of higher education in Illinois. It is now my pleasure to invite one of our most distinguished faculty members, Hattie Professor of Political Economy and Commerce, Ken McMillan, to come to the podium to introduce the 2018 Wiswell-Robeson Lecture. Professor McMillan.
I've known Jean Robeson for nearly 4 decades. She and her family are solid examples of the forward-looking farm families and farm leaders that have made Warren and our surrounding counties agricultural giants. We were the prime beef capital of the world, and this area has produced 1 Illinois Farm Bureau president, 1 U.S. Secretary of Agriculture, a National Pork Producers President, a National Cattlemen's Beef Association President, an American Soybean Association President, and President of the U.S. Grains Council, who was a Monmouth College graduate, by the way. And farmers from here led in establishing a very successful ethanol system, ethanol plant for this area. But on top of all that, for 2017, the last year that data was available, this county had the highest average corn yields in the state of Illinois. This county, this area, is important to Illinois agriculture. And so it's appropriate that Jean should have selected as our speaker for this evening, looking to the land-grant college in Illinois. Now, the land-grant college at the University of Illinois, that's where the marl plots are. Now, the marl plots are the world's oldest continuous corn plots in the world, and they were so important that when the university decided to enlarge the library, they had to build it underground because you couldn't shade the corn. When I started at Illinois more than 50 years ago, the top ag college officials were in India and Sierra Leone, establishing research and education institutions in order to help feed the world. Illinois did the pioneering work in genetics, which has revolutionized corn and soybean production. Swine research and food technology programs were cutting edge. The farm equipment industry, which is kind of focused a few miles north of here, had as its undergirding the best agricultural engineering program in the country. And the first guru of futures markets for the world was at Illinois. So for this lecture, Jean Robeson went right to the top, the dean. Kim Kidwell was from Danville, graduated from Illinois in genetics and agricultural science. She earned her master's and doctorate at the University of Wisconsin in Madison in plant breeding and genetics. Now, she returned to Illinois very recently from Washington State University, where she became a nationally respected scholar, developing 20 new wheat varieties for Washington State farmers, and led to some patents involving gene discovery, gene characterization, and genetic mapping. But the mark she left there was broader. Dean Kidwell spearheaded the new Center for Transformational Learning and Leadership for faculty, for alums, for industry, and for student collaboration. And speaking of students, a few miles down the road from here, a very promising farm lad was graduating from high school. He was looking for a university to study agriculture. Kansas State and Iowa State, two of the best schools, were in his sights. But then Dean Kidwell heard about him, got wind of his westward look. She got on the telephone. She talked to him for an hour, and today he's a freshman in agriculture at Illinois on his way to success. I am very proud to introduce the Dean of the College of Agricultural, Consumer, and Environmental Sciences at the University of Illinois, Dean Kidwell.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here, and I will tell you up front, if anybody gives me a cell phone number and a name of a person that needs to be called so they come to University of Illinois, I'm on the mission. I think that speaks in some ways to something that's really important to me, and that's that we make our best effort to keep some of our talent in the state of Illinois. You know, I'm from Illinois. I was gone for a very long time. When I came back, I never imagined that I'd be the dean of the college that I graduated from, but it's been an incredible honor for me to serve in that role. And I'm very much excited to be here tonight. You know, Jean, I'm in love with you already. You're fabulous. And I have to say that when people do things like this to support their alma mater and connection with their community, it means a lot. So you're the lifeblood of the university and the college here, and I'm really proud to be here. And you can tell me afterwards if you're glad you picked me or not. We'll see. My goal is to keep you all awake. We'll see how that goes too. So you may have noticed that the title is a little different. Actually, I decided to focus primarily on food and agriculture and what's actually happening in that space instead of talking about fuel, because I think it's really important that we start having open conversations about what's happening in the food space in the world today. So I'm an advocate of agriculture. Honestly, when I went to University of Illinois, I wanted to be a lawyer. Then I wanted to be a sports broadcaster, and I became a plant breeder because I met a really awesome professor that loved corn genetics so much that I was curious why he was so excited about it. I worked with him as an undergrad researcher. So my pathway to agriculture wasn't traditional. I didn't come from a farm. But what I know about life in general is that if you're lucky, if you're fortunate, you have a food experience every day. I've traveled all across the world, and that's not true for all people, you know, that they have a good food experience every day. And the dynamic of what's happening in the food space has never been more interesting and more conscious on people's minds than it is right now, which I find fascinating. So never in my life, in my career, have I heard more people actually engage in the discussion about what's going on with food. And it's been kind of an amazing journey. So I want to look back just a little bit and talk a little bit about the history of, well, maybe it's that one. There we go. This must work this way. You know, you can give people a PhD, but that doesn't mean they can operate stuff. So looking back, I just want to talk a little bit about what created the land-grant universities. And so there's one in every state. We just so happen to be the land-grant at University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. Actually, there's a rich history and a connection to this area. Justin Smith Morrill is the person that actually took the policy into President Lincoln, who signed it in 1862. But the conversation about establishing land grants where common people could have access to a college education, actually started by Jonathan Baldwin Turner at Western Illinois, in Illinois. So that whole discussion, he was at Illinois College in Jacksonville. So the conversation started here in the state of Illinois, and then it went on to actually become a foundational principle where each state was allocated 30,000 acres of land to build a university on. The universities have become a network that deal with some of the greatest grand challenges in the ag space. And I think the land grants have delivered incredible volumes of research and education over its long history. It was also coupled with another really important act, which was the Smith-Lever Act, which established all the extension units across the country. So these are federally mandated organizations that are supported with state and county funding, and together they serve as the outreach arm for everything that the land grants do, which is really important. So if this history hadn't happened, we wouldn't be actually involved so much in what we do in the ag space, and so I'm really grateful for the history that we've traveled there. So I think our land grant system was a brilliant, novel idea that's built a lot of foundation of the agricultural industry across the world. So over the course of time, we've seen some really interesting changes in agriculture. And some of you might actually remember this, the days when you didn't have gigantic tractors and you were actually using mules to plow fields. Anybody have any experience with that, or a grandparent that had experience with that, where you actually didn't have automation in agriculture? Amazing, right? When I went out to Washington State, I saw amazing pictures of huge teams of horses dragging sickles across fields to harvest it. Now we have tractors that are bigger than this stage that go out in the fields to do that work. So mechanization in agriculture has really changed the way that we grow food. So we can grow a lot of food on a lot of acreage a lot faster than we used to. For a lot of us, too, the culture of where we get our food has changed as well. How many of you had a garden when you were growing up? Great. How many of you never gardened in your life? A few, right? There was a time that if you didn't have a garden, you actually didn't have access to fresh food and fresh vegetables. And the whole marketing of how food is delivered to us has changed dramatically over the years. So we've changed the way that we do things. The other thing that's happened that's been pretty dramatic is the shift in just normal plant breeding and genetics for selection and biotechnology. So everywhere you go, almost every publication you pick up, you talk about genetically modified organisms. Well, some of the pioneering work that developed that initial technology happened at University of Illinois with Mary Del Chilton and Rob Fraley, who was with Monsanto for decades, actually. So pioneering work that helped us figure out how to actually manipulate the genes in plants a little bit more programmatically so that we could improve food production. We also, and this happened in my lifetime, where computers showed up, and we could actually start analyzing data on computers. Now we can analyze data through digital systems and bring millions of data points together to learn more about landscapes than just at the field size. So the whole way technology is integrated into farming has really changed. We used to actually go out and take one rate of fertilizer or one rate of herbicide and apply it to a whole field. Now the technology has gotten so amazing that we can use robotics to go in and actually put the exact amount of nutrients an individual plant needs to maximize its growth. They're also developing technology now where you electrocute weeds and they die, which frankly I think is kind of cool, and I'd like to see that, you know? I'm eager to see that one. That one's a new technology they're developing right now. We also used to just talk about one field. Now we can actually collect data, look at different weather patterns, water flow patterns, different fertilizer patterns, different productivity patterns all over the globe to figure out what the best place to grow each crop is. It's phenomenal, the data analytics and the computer analysis that's come into agriculture. But I think one of the most interesting things that's happened around food is we just used to eat it for nourishment. The whole landscape around food is changing now. So we actually think of food as more of a prescription for health than just subsistence, which is really interesting. When you think about food, it's one of the most intimate relationships that we have in our lives. We actually consume it, it enters our body. And everything that we eat actually has an impact on how we feel. As a preventative, food is an amazing way to think about health and well-being. And we have a huge research portfolio at University of Illinois and the college around human nutrition. Some of the best human nutritionists in the world are on our campus. And what we talk a lot about now is food for medicine. Not necessarily food just for nourishment, but food as a prescription for health in a way that allows us to activate around eating healthy to stay healthy. And that's a conversation that actually I hadn't heard until very recently. Also, it's a global economy out there. So much of the food, the soybeans that we grow in the state of Illinois actually isn't used here. It's shipped all over the world. And things like changes in tariffs and changes in taxes and global policy impacts our ability to sell food in different countries. That's really been evident in the political scene this year. We can grow a huge amount of crop, and the fact that you do not hoot and holler over being the highest corn yields in the state of Illinois here, like, I'm a little disappointed. You got to give that a shout out. I mean, that's a woo-hoo moment, right? That's a big deal. That's a big deal. So there are production risks in the system that we actually don't manage or have control over, and a lot of that is around government policy, both internal to the U.S. and external. So we can grow a great crop, but can we sell it, and can we get it to the places that it needs to be in a cost-effective, timely manner? Technology is also just crazy in the level of advancement. I'll tell you one thing about this generation that I've really grown to love is they're very entrepreneurial minded, you know. I know, and they're fearless about it. You know, when I was in school, there were a few things that we were cautious about. Not many people studied abroad because we were afraid to go overseas. Now students love to go overseas and see what's going on around them. These are also people that aren't afraid to fail. They're very willing to create a startup company and do something crazy that might seem risky, but allows them to push the envelope a little bit. And so we see all kinds of technologies that are being developed by undergraduates coming right out of college that are developing startup companies that are actually changing the world. On our campus, we've had some really some amazing success. Like the framework for the web actually was created at University of Illinois. You know, PayPal, that came out of Illinois. There's some crazy things that happen, and these are youngsters that go out and change the world. And when I look at some of the people in the audience, I wonder what you're going to do. You look a little scared. It's a big responsibility. But you got to dare to dream, right? Because what happens with you is going to set the tone for the future. And things have changed. Things have changed a bit over time. So it's kind of a really crazy contrast when you think about generations. And, you know, we did not have the internet when I was a kid, you know, and I was born in '63. When you go back even further than that, there are a whole lot of things that people don't have that they're pretty amazed about these days, right? But the landscape is changing, and the things that are influencing food choices have changed dramatically in comparison of the baby boomer generation to the new Z generation, which I just learned about. Like, I'm just getting used to millennials. Now we're into the Zers. I'll tell you a little bit about them. They're a fascinating group. But as far as food choices go, affluence, which means your income, really dictated how much, what kind of food you bought. And it's known from tons of studies that as incomes go up, people buy more protein, especially animal protein. That's been true in this country. It's also true in other countries. So affluence actually dictates some of your purchasing power. Persuasion. There was a day that big marketing was the only way that you ever knew about anything. So the companies, it was mass production, what you could get at a cost-effective price that was in a big volume, you know. And we were all inundated with advertisements from lots of companies. Like, I was pretty excited about things that I'd see on a commercial or on TV, you know, because that was my access point to what was available commercially. And scale mattered, like how much was there and what the cost effectiveness was of a particular food. Well, it's changed a little bit with Generation Z. They look at it a little differently. Trust is a big deal. Big business is not trusted as much as it was a few generations ago. So trust is important, and a lot of that trust comes from what people hear from other folks, people that are in their circle. The circle is really big, though, because we have social media. And so a lot of the information that people get about what's important or valuable to them, they get from Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat. It's not always right, but it's influential. So the way they get information, the way they build trust is important. This generation actually wants to know where their food comes from. They're also interested in who grew it. which I think is fabulous. I've never been in a time in my life where I've actually seen more questions from young people about where their food's coming from. So there's a more personal connection with it instead of mass scale. Also, this generation is very interested in personalizing their food experience. It's not so much what's good for the public in general, it's what's good for me. What's going to be the best food experience for me? You know, do I want local organic? Do I care if it's a mixture of fruits and vegetable? Do I care about food miles? Do I care that an organic banana came from probably South America in a field that was surrounded by commercial production that was treated with chemicals so nothing could get to the organic crop? Do I care about things like that? So a lot of inquiry about where their food comes from, what it's sourced as, and how it's treated. The thing is, this generation is going to set the tone for the future. So even if we don't agree with them, the leaders of tomorrow are in this space. And food is becoming a much more personalized experience. This data was actually generated from A.T. Kearney. They looked at information from 7 different countries to come up with these trends. So what's driving food choices is actually changing, which is interesting and important. What's also changing for us is trends in student populations. So in my college, 90% of the undergrads are not from rural communities. They're from cities. I think that surprised even me, you know, when I came back, because that wasn't the tradition at Illinois. But 90% of the student body in the College of ACES is from an urban setting. Only 10% have anything to do with agriculture. And it makes sense if you think about it, because the population in rural communities has definitely gone down, you know. I've had an opportunity to travel all over the state as the dean and visit all 27 our extension units, and one thing that's really been a consistent theme out in the communities is people are really worried about the future. Is there the possibility for young people that grew up in those communities to come back and live there and thrive? You know, are the communities going to get smaller and smaller as people continue to migrate out? And there's a real interest in economic development and creating vibrancy in these communities. But things have changed a lot. So that means if we want to stay vibrant in the food and ag space, we definitely have to draw people that aren't typically associated with agriculture and food into our space. Over half the people that are interested in food and ag are women. When I was in school, I was usually the only woman in my class. Now, over half of the population is female. That's a hoo-hoo for women. Come on, ladies. Right? That's exciting. I love the balance there, right? It creates a different conversation. And what's so fabulous for me is to see young women step up into job opportunities that were traditionally male and do a really good job. So there's a lot more balance in the genders of people that are coming into the arena. The population is also more diverse than it was before. I'll say this quite honestly, you know, back in the 80s when I was in school, it was a bunch of Caucasian kids that were in the College of Ag. Now we have a very diverse, ethnically diverse, kind of culturally diverse, very interesting demographic out there. So 17% of the students in the university are minorities, 26% of the students in our college are. So we've never seen a more diverse group come into agriculture before, which is fabulous as well. And we've got about 9% of our undergrads come from international places, so we're global as well. So I think the point of it all is we're definitely attracting a different demographic into agriculture than we have in the past. So when you look ahead, ag has really gotten high tech. And I have to say, I give a lot of talks. I talk about ag a lot, and depending on where I'm at, I change the story up. What I talk about more now than I used to is actually food. Uh-oh. Well, no, it doesn't want to go the other way. There we go. So this is, I'm going to confess right away. Somebody asked me if we patented this phrase, seed to soul. I have to tell you, we looked. A guy that grows marijuana in California got it, so he beat me to the punch. Smart man, I'm pretty upset with him, though. So when I talk about food, you know, people talk a lot about field to fork. You know, the experience of putting a seed in the ground, growing a product, that product actually either being fed to an animal or to humans, and then we kind of end the story there. I think the story really becomes more interesting when you go beyond the plate and you think about food from the processing end, from the consumption end, and the impact that it has on human health and well-being. If you think about that continuum, about 20% of the people in the population have any idea where their food comes from. About 80% do not. If we're going to draw a different demographic into creating vibrancy around food production, we've got to meet people where they're at. And when I go out and talk to farmers, they say this to me a lot. People need to know where their food comes from. They're pretty demanding about it, and they get pretty aggressive about it. And I always ask the question, how's that working for us? You know, we've been doing that for a long time. And demanding respect really hasn't had the effect that we want. What if we meet them where we're at, where they're at, and we start talking about food from the perspective of the impact that it has on communities, the impact that it has on health and well-being, the impact that it has in their local arena, and back out of that and start talking about a bigger picture. So when we recruit now, we talk an awful lot about a food experience, and then we back into agriculture. I call that kind of putting the sexy back into ag, right? Like, people don't understand how complex the food system is. What statistic everybody seems to know, though, by 2050, we've got to feed almost 10 billion people. And to do that, we need to increase food production dramatically and also quit wasting so much food. You know, there's a complex balance there between how much we can grow, how much we waste. You know, if we grow it here and we have to deliver it to people in Africa where the population is booming the most, it's probably not the most effective way to do it. In our lens, supporting people and growing food where they're at is a much better way to empower them to have a good food experience every day, which is kind of the goal around health and well-being. But I like the seed to soul the context of this because it actually involves so many facets, all the way from the production end, including sustainability, how it impacts the environment. The consumer is central to it, though. Right? Not necessarily production, but the consumer, what the consumer wants, how it sits in the consumer's perspective, and then everything else builds around it. And I have to say, the nutrition and well-being piece is a really big deal. As I get older, I care more about what I eat, you know? And I've actually become kind of conscious of noticing how I feel when I eat certain things. Although I really love kettle chips, a whole bag is not a good idea. I can tell you that from replicated trials over time. Replicated trials over time would tell me Dean Kidwell should not eat a whole bag of kettle chips at one setting, right? And there's an awareness, kind of a curiosity about that, like how is food used for fuel? And how does it actually fuel me in a way that gives me the energy I want? And there's so much great research out there that talks about health benefits, anti-cancer causing agents, antioxidants, all kinds of things that do good things for you. But here's the bottom line. If it doesn't taste good, we're not going to eat it. You know, you can talk about broccoli all you want. If you don't like the taste of broccoli, you're not going to eat it. Right? So a big part of our research portfolio now is to try to figure out how to create foods for health in a way that we develop a product that somebody wants to eat. Because you know what? I could tell you to the end of the time how good it is for you, and if it does not taste good, you're not going to eat it. And I'm telling you, anything that tastes like kettle chips that's good for me, I would eat. I would eat that. You know what I mean? I do that. So I keep telling even our scientists, we got to meet ourselves where we're at too. Are you going to eat that just because it's good for you? Not necessarily. So the whole food processing industry and the whole way that we create and formulate food is really important. If you go to the grocery store, one thing you might notice is about 90% of the stuff in there we don't even need. Go down the candy aisle, it'll kind of blow your mind the stuff that people make to get kids to eat it in the weirdest shapes and forms with the weirdest stuff in it, and they love it because it's colorful and full of sugar. You know, we've slowly gotten addicted to fat and sugar and salt because that makes us buy things like kettle chips. Can you tell I have a problem with those? You know, my name is Kim Kidwell, and I'm addicted to kettle chips. But it is true, and the food industry now, especially moms, are kind of rising up against this and saying, hey, you know, I want to feed good things to my kids. I don't want to have all these preservatives in it. I want to have healthy things that support them in growing well. And you know, there was a time when putting preservatives in food was the coolest thing. because the shelf life would last forever, you know? So as we've learned and shifted, there's been a lot of changes in our perception of food, and there's been a lot of research done to figure out what's good for you and what's not. You know, Michael Pollan says something that always stuck with me, not that I'm a huge fan of his, but I've read some of his books. Eat real food, mostly plants, not too much. A formula for health, right? And if I do that, I feel better. If I don't do that, I don't feel well. So just tuning into your own body and what works for you is important. But actually talking about the food experience from a health and well-being perspective has really become more important in the whole equation, because that's the driver of how we're going to pull things through the system. It might be that way. So, some crazy things are happening in science that kind of blow my mind. And I am a geneticist, so some of this stuff, you know, is just fascinating to me, actually just completely beyond belief. I get pretty excited about it. So I will also say and admit that some people get really concerned and freaked out about this too. So we're at a time in science where you can actually go precisely into a genome, cut out a piece of DNA that codes for a gene that's non-functional, and replace it with one that's functional. Now, as weird as that sounds, for some of the amazing work that's been done in human health, like with muscular dystrophy, with cystic fibrosis, to me this is kind of a miracle in the happening, you know, where you can actually do gene therapy in a way that's constructive and prevents diseases. You can also do it in plants. So you can prevent big fields of plants from getting sick by taking out the genes that are coding for susceptibility and replacing them with genes for resistance. You can also do it with traditional plant breeding. It just takes a whole lot longer, you know? So when people ask me, do you need biotech to grow food and make advances? You don't. You can just do it more precisely and more efficiently. So, but this technology of gene editing is pretty phenomenal. And if it's adopted and allowed to go forward, and there's a big ethics debate there, it could change the way we do medicine and the way we develop plants for food production, and even animals. We're doing some crazy things to plants to make them more efficient in how they harvest light. So all plants really do is harvest light and turn it into energy. We use that energy as a food source ourselves, or to feed livestock for a food source for us. And if you do that more efficiently, you can actually increase yields. So people are doing some great work to figure out how to engineer plants to do that. And this work actually is being done on campus as well, which is pretty cool as well. We've got all kinds of sensors on tractors. You know, I rode in 3 combines with farmers, corn producers and soybean producers this year. I swear it's like getting inside a video game. You know, when people say, oh, farming's boring, I'm like, you've never been in a John Deere tractor with this crazy thing that tells you it does everything with all the whistles, they're touching stuff and things they're telling you how much and how fast and the wind blowing, all, it's insane. And these are guys that say they can't figure out how their cell phone works. I don't really get that part. I'm like, if you can drive that tractor, you should be able to figure out how to work that iPhone. You know, I don't get it. I don't get that part. But it is fascinating to see how much high technology is used in agriculture these days and how much data is rolling in off these combines. So it actually, they don't even have to download it. It Bluetooths to a computer that their specialized guy that does their data analytics can analyze for them and replot where they actually put fertilizer on the field in the next year. They know every inch of what's happening there. In fact, I got in a tractor. The tractor was honestly as big as the stage. He didn't even drive it. It drove itself. Frankly, I wanted a car that did that right in that moment, but it was a little weird. I'm like, well, what do you do? I think he says, I talk on my cell phone. I'm like, well, he was a little younger. He's figured out that cell phone thing, right? So you don't even have to drive. They use GPS to put a seed in exactly the right spot. Then they put the exact right amount of fertilizer on that to maximize the production of that seed, and you don't even have to drive. Now, for some farmers that did this a long time ago, you must think these guys are kind of sissies, right? Because you didn't need that technology when you were younger. You could just make it happen. But it has really become a high-tech business, and there's so much innovation in technology flowing through ag, it's kind of amazing. And all that data that's being collected and being analyzed is telling us a lot about climate conditions, production conditions, and helping us manage more precisely what we do. But it's really fascinating if you get in one of these big machines and you see what they do. The other thing that's interesting is there's a lot of connectivity among the food chain. So we're to the point now, if you eat a melon, we can backtrace it based on the barcode on it to see exactly what field it came out of and when. That's a food safety issue. You know, when we have concerns with food safety, when something goes wrong in the food system, what's really concerning is people get afraid to eat, you know, and that really causes problems. So food safety has really become an important issue to figure out where things source from, and we can do that very, very easy these days. Robots are everywhere. I'm excited about the one that can clean my house. That would be a good one. And cull my pantry of kettle chips. I'd have to program it to do that. But robotics we use all the time in science. You know, there's some robots that have been built on campus that go right down a corn row and collect all kinds of measurements on those plants so they tell the plant breeder which one is the most productive. Frankly, as a plant breeder who didn't have that technology, I scoff at that a bit because I could do it by eye, so I think. I would like to take on the robot. That could be a contest that we actually have next summer on South Farms, the dean versus the robot. I'm in. That would be fun. I probably would know a whole lot in that moment about how not good I really was. You know, I always think that when a plant breeder passes away, God actually brings up the screen and says, the one that could stop world hunger was right there and you walked right by it. You know, that's the nightmare of a plant breeder, what you leave behind. So a lot more precision in helping people figure out what the best plants to select are. It's really kind of amazing. You know, and personalizing health has really become a big deal. Like if you don't believe that, talk to a young person or go to a farmer's market. You know, there's a lot, especially in urban settings, we're seeing a lot more local food production. It's happening in really interesting, different ways. You can go into, especially in food desert areas, you're seeing a lot of community gardens that are sourcing to bring a fresh source of vegetables into the community. We're seeing vertical farms coming up all over the place where people are taking old factories and converting them into hydroponic food production scenarios. There's a lot of action and talk about how you grow food around where you are, especially in big metropolitan areas where there's such a sink and a demand for food. If people want to know where their food comes from, we got to figure out how to create access to that because trusting a farm, you know what I love about it? Farmers are like salty to their people. I love that people want to know you. I think that's awesome. You know, but what you got to do is get brave enough to go meet them and talk to them about what you do because I think it's pretty important that people have a connection with where their food comes from, and they're definitely demanding that. So there is an increased global demand for food. We've got more integrated businesses up and down the food chain. You know, a lot of vertical integration in the food system where people will grow it, process it, sell it. That's happening all over the place. We've got innovation happening everywhere. I did not know this. The LED light bulb was actually developed on University of Illinois campus. LED light bulbs are changing the world in lots of ways, and what they're doing is making it, in the food and ag space, they're making it possible to grow food under light in vertical farming scenarios. So a lot of that is really changing the world. We've got all kinds of genetically engineered plants. You know, when I was out west, we didn't have many crops that had GMOs in them. It's a food state. We grow a lot of food crops. I come out here, and there's all kinds of GM soybeans and corn in the ground. It's been a little bit surprising to me how the conversation isn't as live and active because it was very controversial out there. But we've got a lot of stuff going on in that space about genetic manipulation that allows us to do things like grow the highest corn yields of any place in Illinois on this soil. And we're getting all kinds of disruption of technology. I'll tell you what's happening that's kind of crazy. Amazon's getting in the food space. You won't even have to go to the grocery store. You get online, you order what you want, and it comes in an Amazon box. I don't know if that's good or bad, but it's interesting. You know, who knew that you could get online at Meijer's and go up through where you used to get your prescription drugs, and somebody comes out and puts your groceries in your back seat, gives you a scanner, you give them your credit card, and they print out the receipt. That happens in Champaign, Illinois. I felt like I was, you know, from the middle of nowhere as I sat out there and watched car after car do that. I'm like, this is cool. They didn't call the police, but I might have after 20 minutes. Like, why is the lady watching us go through get our groceries? It's fascinating, right? There was a day that was unheard of, that you can actually go online and order all your food. Things are changing dramatically, and the question is, what are we going to do to kind of keep up with the advancement and keep integrating and making sure that ag and the food industry are vibrant? So, where are we going in higher education? More non-traditional students. It's interdisciplinary in nature. The whole food system is highly integrated. There are all kinds of players in the landscape. It's not just about production. You know, there's an economic aspect for this. There's an environmental aspect to this. There's a food production. There's all kinds of stuff, food processing, food sales that go into this. Students are interested in flexibility in careers. Students do crazy things these days when they graduate. They quit jobs without having another one. Who does that? You know, if they don't like a job, they quit and they go find a new one. Like, I would never quit a job unless I had another job. Like, fearless they are. And it works for them. They're like, oh, I'll get another job, and it happens. So I'm learning from them a little bit about being brave. You are brave. That's a little crazy to quit a job when you don't have a job. I'm just telling you, but it seems to work for your generation. I'm not sure what that's about. But flexibility in jobs. They say, and I can't believe this either, that on average you will have 40 jobs in your lifetime. What? That's crazy. I've only had 3. Well, 2. Some people don't count being a dean as a job. It's a job. It's a job. But a lot more flexibility, and if they don't like it, they're going to shift and pivot off it, right? A lot of entrepreneurial mindsets. A lot of people are in the space of, I want to do something that makes a difference. I want to be my own boss. I want to figure out how to commercialize this, and I want to change the world. And they're doing it. It's the mindset of this generation. And we've got to draw more of the best and the brightest into agriculture. Like, people don't understand how high-tech it is and how exciting it is. You know, when people see drones flying around fields, I don't think they know that's computer science interfacing with agriculture. Imagine that. You know, when people say farming is boring, they haven't been inside one of the video game-laced tractors, right? There's all kinds of technology in there, and we just don't sell it well. So when I think about what it's like, what it really means to be a 21st century land-grant institution, which is the goal of our college, how do we actually shape forward so that we can be the influencers? And one thing that we have to do that's extremely important is interface with the public in a way that we're translating the discoveries we make on campus into communities and into industry so we're making a difference. To me, that's the essence of a land-grant university. If we don't train the next generation of people and give them the expertise to fearlessly go where we haven't gone before, and if we aren't doing things that matter to people, we aren't fulfilling the land-grant mission. The question is, how do you do that in the 21st century in a meaningful way? Well, there's a couple interesting things. Fields are our living laboratory. That's where translation happens. I can do all kinds of stuff that I do in the lab, but eventually it has to ground test. And we do that in lots of ways. So we're a Illinois Ag Experiment Station. We actually have field stations all over the state of Illinois. There's one very close to here. Many of you probably know of it. It's the Northwestern Illinois Ag Research and Demonstration Center. And we do over 50 experiments there a year. It's over 300 acres, and it's kind of a translation zone where the work comes into the community and translates into this environment. If we don't do that in partnership with communities, it doesn't work, and we've had lots of challenges keeping these things open. So having relationships with local people to help keep the relevance and keep these things alive has become really important, and they're big components of the community. Just as a plug, I hear there's a job opening there if anybody's looking for one. So I think the closing date might have been the 11th. If you tell people you heard me here and you want to apply, they might open the door for you. Is that true? Okay, the door's open, right? So there's a job opening out there. So I want to give you a couple of examples of research that we're doing that's actually making a difference. You know, the thing I tell our scientists all the time, and I've kind of been adamant about this beyond belief, because we get accused of being a research institution with no heart, that we don't care about anything but research. I always tell our scientists, discovery is important, but if those discoveries aren't making a difference in the world, we really aren't fulfilling the land-grant mission. So our goal is to do really good science that pushes the envelope of awareness and implementation to a different level. So just three quick snippets of things that are going on campus that actually have the potential to transform lives in pretty important ways. Wow, that's hilarious. I've been talking about iPhones, and now I got an icon up there. If somebody shows up with a bag of chips, I'm really going to worry. Very good. So there's a huge project called Soy Face. It's about free air concentration enrichment. I didn't know what that meant forever. Pretty much what they're doing is trying to develop plants that deal with heat and high CO2 levels, because that's what's happening in the environment. Trying to figure out how to gain efficiency in plants in that space as we deal with climate change issues. And what's kind of cool is they have all kinds of crazy, like crop circle looking like things out in the field where they take precise measurements on these plants to figure out how they're doing in a high ozone, high CO2 environment. They give that information to plant breeders, and plant breeders use that information to try to develop varieties that are more heat resilient and more adaptable to strained environmental conditions. That also led to the RIPE project, which is about increasing photosynthetic efficiency. They've done this through genetic modification. The Gates Foundation has given them millions of dollars for this project, and the goal is to make plants more photosynthetically efficient so that they capture more light and convert it into energy as opposed to reflecting it or diffusing the energy or the sunlight in a different way. What they're trying to do is make plants more stress tolerant. This is particularly important under droughty conditions. So if you can actually grow food in a droughty environment, it gives people an opportunity to grow food where they are. And in Africa in particular, this is a very, very big deal. If you don't have a lot of water, you want plants that can use energy and water very efficiently so that you get a product out of it. And you know, some of the great things about growing food where you're at, it really helps with some of the preservation issues. The last project I want to mention is the Soybean Innovation Laboratory, which is funded by USAID, which is the International Agricultural Development arm of the federal government. This project is really quite spectacular because what they're trying to do is develop soybean varieties that will actually grow in Africa, a place where they have not grown that protein source. So if you've done a lot of international traveling, you might notice that like food quantity is one thing. Just getting enough calories to sustain people is important. Food quality is a big deal. Nutrition is a problem, and what they're trying to do is introduce a soybean source as a protein source in Africa. And they've developed some really cool techniques that they can do in villages where villagers can actually convert soybeans into a milk product, a high-protein milk product that's really good for kids and babies. So this kind of work is fundamentally basic science. That's converting to something that we hope matters in the big scheme of food production. And this is done by some of the best researchers in these areas in the world. And these are also the same guys that work with undergrads in their programs. So all of the engine is fueled by undergrad and grad students that work with these really famous but cool folks that are very approachable. They tend to really just lean in and want to make a difference, and they work hard to do it. And all these projects actually are funded very well, either through foundations or through competitive grant funding. So in our college, what are we doing to try to change the landscape? So here's a really interesting statistic. For probably 2025, we expect that over 20,000 jobs a year are going to go unfilled in agriculture because we don't have enough graduates in the industry. The jobs are pretty well paying, they're in lots of different areas, and they're very diverse. So our question is, how do we fuel that job demand? How do we actually get people that are interested in going into these careers? Because if we don't do it, it's going to have a negative impact on our ability as a country to produce food. So this is what we're doing in my college. We've got a couple really interesting initiatives. These are new programs. In fact, we had a great conversation about staying current and trying to adaptively manage as new career opportunities come up. So we just developed a new major called Computer Science and Crop Science. It's a data analytics major that allows students to get expertise in growing, producing crops, and also learn fundamentals, come out with a computer science degree so they can actually do big data analytics and know how plants grow. We've got a lot of people that are coming in from engineering, computer science into ag that don't understand how plants grow. That's a tough fit. So this is a new major that just launched this fall that we hope really takes off. The other thing that we're developing, and this is supposed to be on the ground in 2020, is a new major called Metropolitan Food and Environmental Systems. We call it MetroFest, and people always think we're having a party in the city, and yeah, we might do that. You never know. So MetroFest does not have the word agriculture in it for a reason. We cannot get kids from urban settings to look when we lead with the word agriculture. This is kind of an urban ag major with a twist. It's really going to focus kind of on the applied aspects of food production in urban settings and be kind of a liberal arts approach to getting the skill sets that will allow people to be players in metropolitan food production. So we're pretty excited about that too, and it's really been well received. We're also expanding our online education options for a couple reasons. You know, a lot of undergrads actually take classes in their dorm rooms. That concerns me a little bit if they never ever come out. You know, if they never ever come out, that concerns me a little bit. But for busy schedules and course access, sometimes it works better for students to take a course or two online, and so it's under demand from our undergrad population. But we're also working on continuing education, providing professional degrees for people that want continuing education, training in their field, and certificate programs so they can learn more about things that allow them to thrive in their career pathways. The online venue is hot. We even do leadership training online these days, which is kind of interesting and exciting as well. This is a great picture of all the 27 units, extension units across the state of Illinois. It took me 19 months to visit all of them, and in fact I met some folks in the room on these extension visits. My goal was to go out in the country and see what was going on, and to make sure that we were developing a vibrant extension presence across the state that allows us to translate what we're doing in the discovery arena on campus into our communities. There's a lot of work to do there. I have declared 2019 to be the year of extension. That's the year that you're going to see us pivot towards a new 21st century model of extension that changes the way that we do our interface with the public. It is so important that we stay vibrant in communities, you know, and here's what I know about extension and 4-H. That's present in every county, and it is the unsung hero of lots of communities. Not enough people that are influencers know about what we're doing in the extension space, and we're on a mission to get that message to Springfield. You know, I've gone in every one of these counties and had conversations with people about the difference 4-H and extension are making in their communities. If you are a fan, even if you have feedback for us, don't be shy about it. You know, tell your mayor, tell your grocer, tell everybody that you appreciate what's happening in these communities, because what we're going to do is invest some resources to try to shore it up and elevate it so this becomes the platform that our college integrates with the public through. So it's a kind of an exciting moment for extension. We're also doing a couple other programs that are kind of designed to elevate the platform we're on. We're doing a 7-position cluster hire around food and environmental systems for global health. That's a theme among all of our units, and we want to create a platform that we become world-renowned for, and so we're going to add some capacity there. We just developed a Center for Digital Agriculture with the College of Engineering. Again, trying to figure out how we're going to actually create vibrancy around big data analytics and how we're going to use that information to make decisions. We just opened the Integrated Bioprocessing Research Laboratory, which is a center that interfaces academia with industry, where students can do internships, and a lot of it is around using different biological sources for biofuels. And the last one is the Discovery Partners Institute that you might have heard about, and I just want to talk about that briefly. With the change in governors, the $500 million that the state actually dedicated to this is in question. But my thought is no good idea should go unfunded. So this is something that we want to do regardless of what happens with the state money. The Discovery Partners Institute, in short, is designed to be a place where academia interfaces with industry. And the goal is to create these innovative spaces where we're actually pushing innovation into industry through this portal and providing opportunities for students to actually internship in the space. So we want our students to go out and work with industry for a few months as part of their educational experience to build a network and help them translate what they're learning in the classroom to reality. So there's not only one innovation hub. DPI is actually going to be in Chicago. All around the metropolitan areas in the state, we'll be developing these centers through the Illinois Innovation Network. So that's kind of the premise for where we're going to go. There's 4 themes. One's in food and ag, one's in health and wellness, one's in environmental and water, and the other's in computer and data. We do all of those in our college, so we're pretty excited about all those theme areas. But where this comes to be for us is taking a look at how we can partner with people and communities all around the state to do things that matter to you in the place that you live. So these innovation hubs are really designed to stimulate economic development all across the state, using discovery work as the model to stimulate industry and expansion in communities. So what we hope to do is develop a food innovation center in Chicago. And what we want to do is work with our partners in the food industry to get on the front edge of developing food products, especially in sustainable and healthy models. We're interested in educating and training people in that space, like having our students spend a semester or two up in Chicago in DPI working with industry to get that hands-on learning piece going while they're taking classes perhaps online or face-to-face in the space. We want to work closely with Extension to disseminate that information and the tools and technologies we're developing with industry right into communities. And we really want to stimulate economic development across the state so that we create more vibrancy in Illinois. I'll tell you one thing, if I could stop it tomorrow, I would, and that's the tremendous amount of outflow we have of students going to other universities and leaving the state of Illinois because of the economic situation. If we don't fight for this, we're going down, right? I was gone for 31 years. I came back. I came back to my alma mater because it means an awful lot to me. Every portal that ever opened for me started at University of Illinois, and I had no idea how much opportunity I would have. I didn't know what I didn't know when I was a student there. You know, I didn't know how much that degree meant. And when I came back, I just frankly thought people deserve better than this. So when I go out into communities, I ask that you be a part of this, that you actually join us in fighting to create vibrancy in your communities, because if we don't do it together, it's not going to happen. And the food and ag space is vital. It's a vital economic engine in the state of Illinois. If anything happened at all today, I hope you get curious about where your food comes from, because that story is a platform we can build a new initiative on to create more food awareness and more interest in generating viability around the ag industry. There's a lot to do there, and a lot of that can happen right in the surrounding area. So I'm happy to have an opportunity to chat with you about this. I'd be happy to answer any questions or have a conversation about this, but you are part of the food story whether or not you're in the industry or not. And I hope you really honor the fact that it makes a difference, the food choices you make, and the influence that you have on the economy of your community based on those decisions. So with that, I'll take any questions you might have. Any questions? Yeah.
University of Illinois, well, for us, crop science guys are the guys we deal with. And from the people I know recently, as they retire, they're usually not replaced. The gentleman that has done most of the work at the research farm, Emerson National, retired, as far as I know, and he believes he won't be replaced. You cited a wonderful group of initiatives, but how do we keep the basics in place that we've had? Or are they no longer functional?
So this is an interesting story that I've heard all over the state. So in a budget crisis, people make some interesting decisions. So when I got here, what I saw was the university drifting away from extension. And it really was budget related in some ways. You know, we went through the most horrific budget crisis a university has ever seen. You know, the whole state was going through this. And people made decisions about how they were going to deal with that. The decision that the people before me made was to downsize extension. And they did it very well and very assertively. So I show up, you know, new sheriff, new dean, new vision, and I'm like, what's up with that? You know, how can we be a land-grant institution with that big gap between extension? You know I've been talking about this endlessly. She's laughing because this is like my mantra. So we did a diagnostic on what wasn't going well, and part of it was not replacing people that retired. Part of it was not training people in current technology too, and another piece of it was not like kind of modernizing the way we deliver information to people. So we created a task force that gave us a whole bunch of recommendations of how to fix that. What we're going to do is invest in some of these people that we did not replace. It was interesting, I got the hiring plans for the departments just last week, and I'm shocked to tell you that the first 3 positions on the crop science hiring plan were all horticulture extension people. So we're changing the tone a little bit. We're going to reinvest and try to shore up. It's going to look a little different than it did in the past, but it was just a decision at the time based on budget that I think has had some pretty bad repercussions, because there are a lot of people that are still upset about that, and it really had a big impact on communities. So in the year of extension, what you'll see is a reinvestment from the university in our extension system. I'm pretty excited about it. And we have the money because we fought for it from the state. So last 2 years, $20 million not allocated to extension from the state, even though it was in the budget. Crazy. I learned how to fight for money in Springfield, and I liked it. I'm going back. Other questions? Yes, sir.
So can you talk a little bit about how you envision the universities and colleges interacting with private industry and specifically startup industries?
Sure. You know, we do that a lot now. So we've got a research park in Urbana. Well, it's in Champaign, actually. It's really close to campus. And so we see a lot of spin-off companies or startup companies that go into that incubator, and the goal is to support them in commercializing. So it's a pretty seamless relationship. In some cases, a lot of the legwork and the fuel is done by grad students and undergrad that use that as a good training hub. But we've had to learn some ways to navigate around intellectual property, royalties, all that kind of stuff, and we've gotten a lot better at it. When they first started, it was really, really rough. But it's pretty seamless now that, you know, especially if somebody comes up with a really good idea, even if it's one of our academic professionals, they can actually spin off a company, get that started in the incubator, get it going, commercialize it, and then go back to being a professor, you know. So I think we're doing a pretty good job of that. In fact, the research park was created with that purpose in mind, and it's going well. We see all kinds of great companies there. Like, right now, we've got all the big genetics companies there, so, you know, the Corteva, the new Monsanto, the Bayer companies there, we've got them all there. And the reason they come is they want our students. They realize that if they don't show up there and they don't give students an opportunity to work with them, they're going other places. So it's become very competitive. Like if you aren't there, you miss out on the best and the brightest. And so everybody's showing up in that space so they can get a hold of our students. But it's working well. I'm actually impressed. I was skeptical when I first got there. It's really managed well. I think some of the things that you see spin out through the Illinois Innovation Network will be kind of that modality, but the companies will be more local. And the goal is to try to spark and inspire enthusiasm to get people engaged in the communities and to stay in the communities. Other questions? Thank you. Please don't all send me kettle chips. I'm begging you. I'm begging you. I don't know where we're going, but I tell you, it's an interesting time, right? The whole landscape is changing right now, and I mean it. You know, join us in fighting for our space here because it's important as a community. You stand up. You know, if you don't do it, nobody else will. And I don't want to see these communities fade. It's really, really important work. So, you know, stick with my extension folks. Give us a chance. You know, I'm asking people that are upset about extension to forgive us and pivot with me. Because I can't do anything about what happened yesterday, but I can help us create a vibrant tomorrow. And what we got to do is take it seriously and invest and make it work. So, you know, you might have to forgive me and you might have to, like, trust me a little to see if I keep my word. She's betting on me. All right, thank you.